No nanny
Waiting
stayed
for
more than
you,
7 days
sister.
with. But when the billionaire saw his twins do this, he broke down. The mansion had grown too quiet, its silence pressing like grief itself, until the billionaire heard his twins giggling again for the first time in months. But when he saw what they had done, his heart broke wide open. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I'll be bringing you another story just as powerful and emotional as this one. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. The mansion on the hill looked flawless from the outside. Sprawling gardens trimmed to perfection, windows that caught the sunlight like crystal, and a driveway long enough to swallow silence whole. But inside, silence was all that was there. Silence, and the hollow echoes of laughter that once belonged to a woman whose absence had turned a house into a tomb. Adrian Carter, the billionaire everyone in the city admired, envied, or resented, sat at the edge of the piano bench with a glass of scotch untouched in his hand. He hadn't touched the piano since Claire died. It had been her joy, not his. His joy had been her, and without her, even music sounded like noise. He glanced at the clock. 6:30. That was the hour when Claire used to make pancakes shaped like stars for the twins, giggling at their syrup-smeared faces. But now 6:30 was just another reminder of the routine he couldn't replicate, no matter how many chefs, nannies, or staff he hired. From upstairs, a door slammed. A nanny's muffled voice shouted something like, "That's it. I can't," before footsteps thundered down the hall. Adrian didn't even get up. He didn't need to. He already knew. Another one gone. The twins, Ethan and James, had chased out 6 nannies in 6 months. No one lasted longer than 7 days. Some left with excuses about better opportunities, but most walked out crying, muttering that the children were unreachable. Unreachable. The word made Adrian's jaw tighten. His children weren't unreachable. They were grieving. Just like him. He stood as the nanny, a young woman in her 20s, stormed down the marble staircase with her bag slung over her shoulder. Her eyes were red, and her voice trembled. "I'm sorry, Mr. Carter. I tried, but they don't want me here. They don't want anyone." He opened his mouth to argue, but nothing came. What could he say? She was right. He only nodded. She left without looking back. The sound of the door slamming echoed through the cavernous halls, and then, silence again. Silence so thick it felt like punishment. Upstairs, 6-year-old Ethan and James sat cross-legged on the floor of their late mother's room. They hadn't let anyone pack it up. Her perfume bottles still lined the vanity, her books still stacked on the nightstand. They pressed their faces into the sweaters hanging in her closet when no one was watching, breathing in the faint trace of lavender and vanilla that still clung there. James's curls stuck out in wild directions as she whispered to his brother, "Do you think she hates us? For not stopping it?" Ethan shook his head fiercely, his small fists clenching. "No. She didn't leave because of us. Daddy just doesn't say it, but I know." His voice cracked. "She was sick, Em. She didn't want to go." They sat in silence for a long time, hugging a stuffed rabbit that had belonged to their mother. Downstairs, the echo of footsteps reminded them that their father was close by, yet still far away. They loved him, but he had become a shadow of himself, a man who looked at them but couldn't see through his own grief. Every nanny that walked into their lives seemed like an intruder. They didn't want anyone replacing their mom. So they drove them away. Sometimes with tantrums, sometimes with icy silence. Either way, the result was the same. Later that evening, Adrian leaned against the window in his study, watching the rain streak across the glass. His reflection stared back at him, a man with sharp features and eyes too tired for his age. Billionaire, yes. Powerful, yes. but powerless where it mattered most. He thought about the board meeting he had skipped, the business deals piling up, the empire his father had built and expected him to expand. None of it mattered. Not if his children grew up thinking silence was normal. His phone buzzed with a message from Mrs. Alvarez, the longtime housekeeper. "Mr. Carter, I know you don't want to hear it, but the twins need someone consistent. I heard about a candidate. She's not like the others. Maybe give her a chance?" Adrian almost ignored it. What was the point? But something about Mrs. Alvarez's faith made him pause. She'd been with his family for 15 years, had practically raised him alongside his late wife. If she believed in this woman, maybe. He typed back one word. "Fine." The next morning, the twins sat at the kitchen island pushing cereal around their bowls when the sound of the front door opening reached them. Their eyes flicked up warily. And there she was. Tall, with warm brown skin and a round belly that entered the room before she did. Her hair was braided neatly, her eyes soft but steady. She didn't wear the stiff uniform of the other nannies. Instead, she wore a simple dress that moved easily as she walked. "Good morning," she said, her voice calm, like she was talking to old friends. She set down her bag, her hand absently resting on her stomach. "I'm Brenda." The twins didn't answer. They didn't even look at her for long. They turned back to their cereal, walls already up. Brenda didn't flinch. She didn't press them with questions or force a smile. She simply moved into the kitchen, humming softly as she began to make toast. Adrian stood in the doorway, watching closely. He expected the usual. Children running out, screaming, or throwing things. But instead, they simply ignored her. For now. Something about her presence was different. She didn't rush. She didn't hover. She just existed in the space with a quiet assurance that filled the silence without trying to erase it. For the first time in months, Adrian felt the smallest flicker of something unfamiliar. Hope. If you were in Adrian's shoes, watching your children reject everyone but still yearning for someone to reach them, would you keep trying new nannies, or would you give up? Share your thoughts in the comments. The following days were cautious ones in the Carter household. Adrian Carter had learned not to expect much. Every new nanny started with polite optimism, smiling too brightly, setting down toys or treats, kneeling to the twins' level with hopeful eyes. It always ended the same way. Resistance, anger, tears. But Brenda was different. She didn't try to win the boys over with forced cheer. She didn't bribe them with sweets or overwhelm them with questions. Instead, she gave them what they didn't know they needed: space. On the second morning, Adrian watched from the hall as the boys sat on the living room floor with their toy cars spread across the rug. Brenda entered carrying a laundry basket. She didn't say a word to them. She simply set the basket down, sat on the floor herself, and began folding towels. Her belly shifted with her movements, her hands sometimes pressing there unconsciously as if to reassure the life inside her. The twins glanced at her once. Then again. Then again. Finally, one of them spoke. "Why are you sitting on the floor?" His tone was defensive, as if he were daring her to give the wrong answer. Brenda looked up, her face calm. "Because the couch feels too far away from the sound of cars racing." The boy frowned, unsure how to respond. He exchanged a look with his brother, who shrugged. Brenda returned to folding. The silence stretched, but it wasn't heavy. It was the kind that invited curiosity. Eventually, the second boy crawled a little closer, deliberately driving his toy car in a loop that edged near her folded stack of towels. "Don't crash into my mountain," she said, her eyes twinkling just enough. The boy froze, then gave the faintest smile before redirecting the car. Adrian's chest tightened. It wasn't much, but it was more than anyone had gotten in months. That evening, Adrian found himself standing by the doorway of the kitchen again. He told himself he was only checking, but in truth, he couldn't stay away. Brenda stood at the counter peeling apples while the boys sat at the island, sketching quietly with crayons. At first, he thought they were drawing cars and rockets, the usual chaos of childhood. But when he stepped closer, he saw what they were actually scribbling. A woman with long hair and arms stretched wide. Their mother. His throat closed. One of the boys noticed him watching and immediately shoved the paper aside, face flushed. The other ducked his head, pretending not to notice. Brenda didn't move to cover the drawings, didn't scold them, didn't make it a spectacle. She simply said, "She looks like she smiled a lot." The twins froze. Slowly, one of them nodded. "She did," he whispered. "But not anymore." Adrian almost stepped forward, but something held him back. Brenda's voice was softer now, but steady. "Smiles don't disappear just because we can't see them. Sometimes they live right here." She placed her hand gently on her chest. "And they come back when we remember them." The twins didn't answer, but Adrian saw it, the way their shoulders softened, the way they didn't push the paper away again. For the first time, someone had spoken about their mother without flinching, without pity, without fear. And for the first time, the boys didn't turn away. Later that night, after the twins had gone to bed, Adrian found Brenda in the library. She was arranging children's books on a shelf, her movements slow but deliberate. "You handled them well today," he said, surprising himself with the compliment. Brenda looked up. "They don't need handling, Mr. Carter. They need listening." The words struck deeper than he expected. Listening. How long had it been since he really listened? Since he allowed them to talk about their mother without trying to steer them away from the pain? He cleared his throat. "They've driven off everyone else. What makes you different?" Brenda rested a hand on her belly, her gaze steady. "Maybe because I know what it feels like to lose and not have words for it. I don't push them. I just sit in it with them." Adrian studied her, the swell of her stomach, the quiet strength in her tone. There was a story behind her calm, one she hadn't shared. Before he could ask, she added softly, "Your boys are brave, you know. They protect each other. That kind of bond is rare." For a moment, the silence between them wasn't heavy. It was grounding. 2 days later it happened. The spark. The twins had disappeared upstairs after breakfast, and when Brenda went looking for them, Adrian followed, half expecting chaos. He braced himself for broken vases, crayon marks on the walls, or worse. But what they found was something else entirely. The boys were in Brenda's room. Not destroying it, not hiding from her. They were sitting cross-legged on the floor, markers scattered around them. And on Brenda's belly, her round, expectant belly, they had drawn in bright colors. Hearts, stars, and in clumsy, blocky letters. "Waiting for you, sister." Adrian froze in the doorway, the air rushing out of his lungs. The boys looked up, guilty at first. But then one of them said quietly, "She's going to be our sister, right? So we're telling her we're waiting." Brenda's eyes shimmered, but she didn't stop them. She simply placed her hand over their small ones, guiding the marker with patience. Adrian's vision blurred. For the first time since Claire's death, tears burned hot and unstoppable. He turned away, pressing his fist to his mouth, his body shaking. Because in that messy, colorful scrawl, his sons had done what grief had stolen from him. They had opened the door to hope, and it undid him completely. What do you think? Was it the nanny's patience, or the twins' innocence, that truly started breaking the father's grief? Comment below with your take. For the next few days, the house felt lighter than it had in months. The twins were calmer, their voices no longer sharp with anger. They didn't laugh often, but the quiet wasn't so heavy anymore. Adrian noticed the difference. He noticed everything. Ethan and James didn't slam doors as much. They sat near Brenda without glaring at her. They even allowed her to read to them at night, though they pretended to fall asleep before the stories ended. It should have been a victory. But to Adrian it felt fragile. Too fragile. One afternoon, he caught himself staring at the colorful words still faintly visible on Brenda's belly. "Waiting for you, sister." The boys had used washable markers, but no matter how many showers Brenda took, a trace of the letters remained like a ghost. Something about it unsettled him. Part of him wanted to smile. His sons had found joy again, had opened their hearts to someone new. But another part recoiled. Wasn't this a betrayal of Claire? His wife had been the only woman who truly belonged in their world. How could the boys so easily attach to another? That night, when Ethan and James were asleep, Adrian paced the library. The fire burned low in the hearth, shadows dancing on the walls. Brenda entered quietly, carrying a blanket draped over her shoulders. "You're restless," she said softly. "I'm fine," he replied too quickly. She tilted her head, studying him. "You're not. But that's all right. Grief doesn't leave just because we want it to." Adrian's jaw clenched. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple." She lowered herself into a chair, wincing slightly as she adjusted her belly. "It's painful. And complicated. But your boys, they're trying. You should let them." Her words stung. "Let them? You think it's that easy?" His voice rose before he caught himself. "Do you know what it feels like to lose the only person who made sense of this entire life?" Brenda's eyes didn't flinch. "Yes." The single word landed like a stone. Adrian stared at her, his anger faltering. She didn't explain, didn't elaborate. She just held his gaze with quiet certainty. Something in his chest twisted. He wanted to ask, "Who did you lose? How?" But fear of the answer kept him silent. The next morning, Ethan and James were back to testing limits. When Brenda asked them to put away their Legos, Ethan muttered, "You're not Mom. You don't get to tell us." James crossed his arms in agreement, his chin jutting out defiantly. Brenda didn't scold, didn't lecture. She simply nodded. "You're right. I'm not your mom. I never will be. But I care about you, and caring means helping you take care of your things." Her calmness disarmed them. James huffed, muttered something under his breath, but he began scooping Legos into the box anyway. Ethan hesitated longer, his eyes narrowing, but eventually followed. Later, Adrian overheard Ethan whispering to his brother in the hallway, "If we like her too much, Daddy will forget Mom." The words pierced like a knife. Adrian stepped back before they saw him, leaning against the wall with his hand pressed over his chest. His boys weren't just resisting Brenda. They were afraid of betraying their mother's memory. And in truth, so was he. That evening, Adrian confronted Brenda again, his frustration spilling over. "They're attaching to you too quickly," he said, pacing his office. "It's not healthy." Brenda's eyebrows rose. "Not healthy. Adrian, they're children. They've been drowning in silence, and for once they're breathing. That's not unhealthy. That's survival. You don't understand." "I understand more than you think." Her tone sharpened. "I know what it's like to love someone who's gone. And I know the guilt of smiling again, of finding warmth in a world that feels cold. But do you want them to stay in the cold forever?" His fists clenched at his sides. "If they let you in, they'll forget her." Brenda stood, her hands pressed against her belly as if drawing strength from within. "No, Adrian. They'll never forget her. But they might learn to live without hurting every second. Isn't that what Claire would have wanted? Her words cracked something in him, but instead of answering, he turned away, staring out the window into the night. His reflection stared back, eyes hard, mouth tight. A man torn between love and loss. Behind him, Brenda sighed. You're not the only one resisting. They are too. But they're children. They'll choose healing if you let them. The question is, will you? The following day, resistance came from the twins in a different way. James refused to eat breakfast, arms crossed over his chest. Ethan sulked, pushing his cereal bowl away. We don't want pancakes if Mom didn't make them. Brenda didn't argue. She didn't coax. She simply ate a piece of toast herself, silent. After a while, Ethan shifted uncomfortably, then grabbed his spoon. James followed reluctantly. Adrian watched from the doorway again, torn between admiration and unease. Brenda wasn't forcing them. She was letting them feel, letting them choose. But he still feared the cost. That night, after the boys were asleep, Adrian sat alone in the music room, staring at the piano. His fingers hovered over the keys. Claire's piano. He wanted to play. He wanted to remember her through music. But as soon as his hand pressed a note, the sound broke him. He slammed the lid shut, his head falling into his hands. The door creaked open. Brenda stepped inside, barefoot, her face gentle. She didn't say anything. She didn't move closer. She simply leaned against the wall, her presence steady. For once, Adrian didn't feel invaded. He just felt seen. And that terrified him. If you were Adrian, torn between protecting your late wife's memory and letting your children heal, what choice would you make? Hold on to grief, or risk opening the door to love again? Share in the comments. Rain hammered against the tall windows of the mansion, a relentless storm that turned the outside world into a blur of gray. Inside, the power flickered once, twice, before going out completely. The silence that followed was broken only by James's startled voice. "Daddy, it's dark." Adrian rose quickly from the armchair in the study, his flashlight already in hand. "It's just a power cut, buddy. Stay calm." But both boys were already clutching each other's arms, wide-eyed. The storm reminded them of that night, the night their mother had been rushed to the hospital and never returned. Adrian's chest ached at the memory. He bent down. "I've got you. Both of you." Just then, Brenda appeared in the doorway, her dress slightly damp, a candle glowing in her hand. Her calmness contrasted with the storm outside. The generators slow to kick in. "But we'll be fine." The twins didn't answer her. Instead, they pressed themselves against Adrian's legs, clinging to him as though the storm might snatch them away. Adrian picked them up, one in each arm, their small bodies trembling against his chest. He hadn't carried them like this since they were toddlers. The weight of them now, heavier but still vulnerable, struck something deep inside him. "Come on," Brenda said softly, leading them down the hall. "The safest place is the library. Thick walls. Big fireplace. We'll wait it out there." The four of them gathered in the library, the firelight flickering shadows across the shelves of old books. The storm roared outside, but inside, the warmth of the fire began to chase away the chill. Ethan sat on the rug, knees hugged to his chest, watching the flames dance. James leaned against his father, head tucked under Adrian's arm. Brenda lowered herself into a chair with a small sigh, her hand resting on her belly. "Storms used to scare me too when I was little. But then my grandmother told me thunder is just the sky playing drums." James's head lifted slightly. "Drums?" "Yes," Brenda said with a smile. "A celebration. Like the sky is making music for us." Ethan frowned. "It doesn't sound happy." Not all music sounds happy, she admitted. But even sad music is still music. Sometimes it helps us feel what we can't say. The boys stared at her, silent, but something in their posture shifted. They weren't trembling anymore. Adrian noticed. And he noticed, too, the way Brenda's words soothed not just the twins, but him. Hours passed. The storm raged on, trapping them together. Adrian tried reading, but his eyes kept drifting to his sons, who had finally dozed off on the rug with a blanket tucked around them. Brenda sat across from him, a soft glow from the fire illuminating her face. She looked tired but peaceful, her hand absently rubbing slow circles on her belly. "You're good with them," Adrian said quietly. She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "They just need someone who sees them." Her words lingered in the space between them. Adrian felt the urge to ask again, "Who did you lose?" But he bit back the question. He wasn't sure he was ready to hear her answer. Instead, he said, "You make it sound so easy." Her lips curved faintly. "It's not. But I've learned sometimes love isn't about fixing everything. It's about being present in the brokenness." The fire cracked, filling the silence that followed. Adrian's throat tightened. He wanted to argue to keep his walls up, but with the storm outside and Brenda's calm presence inside, resistance felt exhausting. For a fleeting moment, he allowed himself to wonder what it would feel like to stop fighting. The storm stretched into the next morning, cutting out roads and phone lines. Mrs. Alvarez couldn't make it back to the mansion, nor could the ground staff. It was just the four of them. By noon, the twins had discovered the storm had knocked out the internet. Their wails of "no cartoons" echoed through the halls. Brenda didn't panic. She gathered them in the living room and said, "Well then, I guess we'll have to make our own fun." She handed them spoons and pans, grinning at their confused faces. "If the sky can play drums, so can we." Ethan's eyes lit up first. He banged a spoon against the pan. James followed, hesitant at first, then louder. Within minutes, the house was filled with their laughter and chaotic rhythm. Adrian leaned against the doorway, watching. The sight of his boys laughing, really laughing, sent a rush of warmth through his chest he hadn't felt in so long. Brenda caught his gaze over the boys' heads. Her smile was quiet but knowing. And in that moment, Adrian realized the storm had done something he couldn't. It had trapped them together, forced them into proximity. And in the closeness, something fragile but real was forming. That night, after the boys finally collapsed in bed from exhaustion, Adrian found himself lingering in the hallway outside Brenda's room. He could hear her soft humming through the door, a lullaby low and steady, probably to the child growing inside her. Without thinking, he raised his hand to knock. Then he froze. What would he even say? Thank you. For giving his sons laughter again? For softening the edges of a house that had felt like a mausoleum? For making him feel things he wasn't ready to feel? His hand dropped. He turned away. But deep inside, he knew something had shifted. The storm outside had passed, but the storm inside him had only just begun. Do you believe that sometimes life forces us into storms, just so we can discover healing in unexpected places? Share your thoughts in the comments. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world scrubbed clean. The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows, glinting off puddles in the driveway and painting the walls of the Carter mansion in gold. Yet inside, something heavier lingered. Not the storm's residue, but the silence that followed. Adrian watched from his study window as Ethan and James chased each other across the wet lawn, their laughter echoing faintly. It was a rare sound, one he wanted to bottle to keep forever. And he knew it was because of her. Brenda. She had brought laughter back into this house. She had done what no one else could. But Adrian couldn't decide if that made him grateful or afraid. Later that afternoon, Adrian entered the kitchen to find Brenda at the sink, sleeves rolled up, washing vegetables. Her movements were unhurried, almost meditative. She hummed softly under her breath, that same low lullaby he had heard outside her door the night of the storm. "Where'd you learn that song?" he asked, leaning against the doorway. Brenda looked up, startled, then smiled faintly. "My mother used to sing it. She said it was her mother's before her. A kind of inheritance." Adrian nodded, though he felt the weight of unspoken words in the room. He wanted to ask, "Where is she now?" But something told him the answer wasn't simple. "Do you mind if I ask you something?" he said carefully. "Depends on the question," Brenda replied, setting a tomato on the cutting board. "Why this job? Why here? Most women in your situation," he gestured vaguely toward her belly, "wouldn't take on 2 grieving 6-year-olds and a house this heavy." Her knife paused mid-slice. She didn't look up immediately. When she did, her eyes were steady. "Because I know what it's like to be a child who needs someone to stay." The words sank like stones in water. Adrian frowned. "What do you mean?" Brenda set the knife down. She wiped her hands on a towel and leaned against the counter. Her posture strong but her voice quieter now. "My father left before I was born. My mother did her best, but she was sick a lot. By the time I was Ethan and James's age, I was already learning how to cook, how to clean, how to take care of her. And then one day..." She exhaled slowly. She didn't wake up. Adrian's chest tightened. "You were 6. 7. She gave a small, humorless smile. "There were relatives. Foster homes. People came and went. But no one stayed long enough to feel safe. That's why I understand your boys. Why they push people away. Because I used to do the same thing. Better to drive someone out than let them leave on their own." The kitchen fell silent except for the soft drip of the faucet. Adrian's throat ached. He had seen glimpses of strength in her, but now he understood the roots of it. She wasn't just patient with his sons. She was them once. Finally, he asked the question that had lingered in his mind since the night in the library. "And the father of your child?" Her hand instinctively moved to her belly. She hesitated, then said softly, "He's not here. He chose not to be." Adrian's jaw tightened. "He walked away." "Yes." Her voice didn't shake, but her eyes glistened. "When I told him I was pregnant, he said he wasn't ready. That I should take care of it." Her hand pressed protectively against her stomach. "But I couldn't. I wouldn't. This baby is mine, and she deserves to be loved, even if it's only by me." The words hit Adrian like a blow. He thought of Claire, of the life they had built, of how much he would have given to keep her alive. And here was Brenda, abandoned, yet holding on to life with both hands. "You're stronger than you think," he murmured. Her lips curved faintly. "No. I'm just stubborn. I won't let this child grow up wondering if they were wanted." The silence stretched, heavy but intimate. Adrian realized then why his sons trusted her. Brenda understood abandonment in her bones. She carried the weight of it, and somehow turned it into gentleness. That evening, the twins discovered something new. They had wandered into the library, where Brenda sat curled in an armchair, reading aloud softly. Not to them, but to her belly. "What are you doing?" James asked, suspicious. Brenda looked up, smiling. "Reading a story. To the baby." Ethan tilted his head. "Yes. She can hear me even in here." She patted her belly. "It helps her know my voice." The boys exchanged wide-eyed glances. Then Ethan shuffled closer. "Can we read too?" Brenda blinked, surprised. Of course. She handed him the book. Ethan perched on the arm of the chair, his voice stumbling over the words at first, then growing steadier. James hovered nearby, listening intently. Adrian stood in the doorway again, watching. His sons weren't just tolerating Brenda anymore. They were reaching for her, including themselves in her world. And a pang shot through him. Half awe, half fear. Later, when the boys had gone to bed, Adrian found Brenda outside on the balcony. The night air was cool, the city lights glowing faintly in the distance. "Thank you," he said simply. She turned, eyebrows raised. "For what?" "For telling them stories. For telling me yours. For—" his voice caught. "For staying." Brenda's expression softened. "I told you. I don't run from broken things." Adrian's chest tightened. "But what about you? Who takes care of you?" For a moment, her guard slipped. He saw the loneliness flicker in her eyes, the weight she carried alone. Then she looked away, her voice barely above a whisper. "No one. But I've gotten used to it." Something inside him rebelled at that. No one should be used to being alone. He wanted to step closer to reach out, but his feet stayed rooted. His heart was still bound by Claire's memory, by the fear of betraying her. So instead he said nothing, and the silence between them carried everything unsaid. Over the next days, the twins began peppering Brenda with questions. "Does the baby kick? Will she have curly hair like us? Can she hear us if we talk really loud?" Brenda answered each one patiently, letting them press their ears against her belly, letting them laugh when a kick thumped against her skin. Adrian watched it all, torn between wonder and unease. His sons were opening themselves to love again, and he wasn't sure he knew how to follow. Do you believe children sometimes see truth faster than adults? Like Ethan and James embracing Brenda before Adrian can? Share your thoughts in the comments. The Carter mansion had changed. It wasn't louder exactly, but it wasn't suffocating anymore. There were giggles in the hallways, whispered conspiracies between Ethan and James, and the sound of Brenda's humming drifting through the rooms like sunlight sneaking through curtains. Adrian noticed it in the small things. How his sons raced to the kitchen in the morning instead of dragging their feet. How they stopped hiding in Claire's old room every night, choosing instead to curl up near Brenda's chair with their books and blankets. And, most of all, how the house didn't feel like a mausoleum anymore. It felt alive. One Saturday morning, the boys begged Brenda to take them outside. The sky was clear, the lawn still damp from dew. "Race you to the tree," James shouted, sprinting across the grass. Ethan followed, his laughter carrying across the yard. Brenda stood at the edge of the porch, her hand on her belly, smiling as they ran. Adrian watched her. He hadn't meant to. He had come out only to make sure the boys didn't wander too far. But his eyes kept straying to her. Her steady posture, the warmth in her expression, the way she radiated calm even when chaos swirled around her. "You shouldn't be on your feet too long," he said, his voice sharper than he intended. Brenda arched an eyebrow. "I'm pregnant, Adrian. Not fragile." He cleared his throat, feeling oddly embarrassed. "Still, you should be careful." Her lips curved. "And who's going to catch them if they fall?" "You." He glanced at the twins tumbling through the grass, their knees already stained green. "Probably not," he admitted. Brenda chuckled, the sound low and warm. For a fleeting moment, Adrian allowed himself to smile too. Later that day, Brenda coaxed the twins into helping her bake cookies. Adrian wandered into the kitchen to find flour dusted across every surface and the boys proudly holding sticky balls of dough. "They're disasters," Brenda said, shaking her head with mock dismay. "But disasters taste just as good." James shoved his dough into his mouth before she could stop him. He announced, grinning through a mouthful. Adrian shook his head. You're going to get sick, James. Then you'll have to stay up with me all night, James teased, giggling. Ethan held up his misshapen lump. This one's for you, Dad. Adrian froze, the simple gesture catching him off guard. His son hadn't offered him anything, hadn't even reached toward him in so long. He swallowed hard, forcing a smile. Thank you, buddy. Brenda caught his eye across the kitchen. She didn't say a word, but her look said everything. They're healing. Let them. And for the first time, Adrian let himself believe it. That night, the housekeeper, Mrs. Alvarez, returned after being gone for several days. She found the family in the living room, Ethan and James sprawled on the rug with coloring books, Brenda humming softly as she folded laundry, and Adrian sitting nearby, not buried in work but actually present. Mrs. Alvarez blinked, startled. It feels different in here, she murmured. Adrian looked up. Different how? Her eyes softened. Alive again. Adrian's throat tightened. He glanced at Brenda, who looked away, pretending to concentrate on the laundry. Alive again. The words lingered like a blessing and a burden. The next week, Ethan got sick. It started with a cough, then a fever. Adrian panicked, memories of hospital rooms flooding back. He hovered over the boy, calling the doctor, pacing the floor. Adrian, Brenda said firmly, her hand on his arm. He's going to be fine. Sit down. Let me help. I can't just sit. Yes, you can. Her voice softened, steady as stone. He needs calm, not panic. Remember, they take their cues from you. Adrian stared at her, his chest heaving. Slowly, he sank into the chair beside Ethan's bed. Brenda sat on the other side, dampening a cloth to press against the boy's forehead. Her touch was gentle, practiced. She hummed that lullaby again, low and soothing. Ethan stirred, his eyes half closed. Daddy. I'm here, son. Adrian reached for his hand. It was small, clammy, but it gripped as tightly. You won't leave, right? Ethan whispered. Adrian's chest broke. Never. I'll never leave you. Across the bed, Brenda's eyes met his. For once, there was no resistance between them, just shared tenderness. Hours later, when Ethan finally slept peacefully, Adrian whispered to Brenda, "Thank you." She shook her head. "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do." His voice cracked. "I don't know what I'd do without you here." Her breath caught. For a moment, the room felt charged with something unspoken, something neither dared to name. Days later, Ethan was back to normal, running wild with James in the garden. Adrian and Brenda watched from the porch, the late afternoon sun casting everything in gold. "You're good with them," Adrian said quietly. Brenda smiled faintly. "They're good kids. They just needed someone to see them." Her words struck him again, deep and true. "And what about you? Who sees you, Brenda?" For the first time she looked away, her voice low. "No one really. I've learned to live without it." Adrian's heart twisted. He wanted to tell her she wasn't alone anymore, that he saw her not just as a nanny, but as a woman who carried strength and gentleness in equal measure. But the words lodged in his throat, caught between loyalty to Claire's memory and the pull of the present. So instead, he said nothing. But when Brenda turned her head, he saw it in her eyes. She knew. The moment of true bonding came unexpectedly. The twins had insisted on a movie night, piling blankets and pillows in the living room. They begged Adrian and Brenda to join, and for once, Adrian didn't say no. Halfway through the film, James fell asleep with his head in Adrian's lap. Ethan curled against Brenda's side, his hand resting on her belly as if guarding the child within. Adrian looked across the blankets at Brenda. She looked back. The room was quiet except for the flicker of the screen and the soft breathing of the boys. And in that silence, something passed between them. Something fragile, tender, and undeniable. They were no longer just grieving father and hired nanny. They were something more. A family in the making. Later, when the boys were carried upstairs and tucked in, Adrian lingered by Brenda's door. He wanted to knock to say something, anything that matched the pull he felt. But his hand froze inches from the wood. Because to step closer to her meant stepping further from Claire. And he wasn't sure he was ready. Do you think Adrian is holding back out of love for his late wife, or fear of letting himself love again? Which one is stronger? Share your thoughts in the comments. The air in the Carter mansion was different. Not warmer, not colder, just tense. Like the moments before a storm, when the sky seems to hold its breath. It began with whispers. Brenda had taken the boys to the park on a quiet Sunday afternoon. They returned flushed and laughing, Ethan carrying a soccer ball under one arm and James proudly holding a stick like a sword. But Adrian was already waiting in the foyer, his jaw tight, his phone still in his hand. "Where have you been?" His voice was sharp, too sharp. Brenda blinked, surprised. "At the park. You knew." "I didn't know," Adrian cut in. His voice rose. "I got a call from Thomas Green. He said he saw you there, alone, with my sons. No bodyguard. No driver. Nothing." Brenda's brows furrowed. It was broad daylight. 10 minutes away. They needed fresh air. "That's not the point." Adrian's voice cracked like thunder. "You don't take chances with my children. Not ever." Ethan and James froze, wide-eyed, their earlier laughter evaporating. Brenda glanced at them, then back at Adrian. Her tone hardened, steady but edged with fire. "I would never put them in danger. They're safe with me. Safer than with a stranger in a suit they don't trust." "You don't get to decide that," Adrian snapped. His chest rose and fell rapidly. "You're here because I hired you. Don't mistake that for..." He stopped, but it was too late. The words had slipped. Brenda's face went pale. Her hand pressed against her belly. "Don't mistake that for what, Adrian?" "For family. For something real." Silence. Heavy, brutal silence. The boys shifted uncomfortably, sensing the explosion between them. Adrian forced the next words out, bitter with fear. "You're their nanny, Brenda. That's all." The words landed like shards of glass. That night, Brenda packed a small bag. She folded each item carefully, as if order could quiet the storm inside her. A knock came at her door. It was James. His voice was small, trembling. "Brenda, are you leaving?" Her hands froze. Slowly she turned. Both boys stood in the doorway, their eyes wet, pajamas wrinkled from tossing in bed. Ethan clutched her arm. "You can't go. Please. We'll be good, we promise." Her chest broke. She crouched slowly, her belly straining, and pulled them close. "Oh, sweethearts. This isn't about you. You've been wonderful. It's me and your dad. We don't agree." James shook his head furiously. "We don't care about Dad. We care about you." Tears spilled before she could stop them. "I care about you too. More than you know." She kissed their foreheads, lingering as if memorizing them. But sometimes, people have to walk away, even when they don't want to. The boys clung tighter. "No." Ethan sobbed. "First mommy, now you." "No." Brenda's heart shattered. She rocked them gently, whispering soothing words she didn't believe herself. Down the hall, Adrian stood frozen outside her door. He had come to apologize, to undo the knife-edged words he had thrown in fear. But when he heard Ethan's cry, "First Mommy, now you," it hit him like a blow. He staggered back, the truth slamming into him. His words hadn't just wounded Brenda. They had ripped open his son's deepest wound. And still, he didn't knock. Cowardice rooted him in place. He turned, retreating to his study, drowning in guilt. The next morning was colder. Brenda moved through the kitchen quietly, making breakfast but avoiding Adrian's eyes. The boys sat at the counter, subdued, poking at their food without appetite. Adrian entered, the weight of sleepless hours etched on his face. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Brenda didn't look at him. "Eat up, boys," she said softly, forcing cheer into her tone. "We've got a busy day." But Ethan and James only glanced at Adrian, their eyes hard, as if holding him responsible for everything. And maybe they were right. That afternoon the breaking point came. Brenda was in the garden with the twins when Adrian's sister, Caroline, arrived unexpectedly. She was elegant, polished, and sharp-tongued, the kind of woman who always seemed to find fault. She spotted Brenda immediately, her gaze narrowing at the sight of the boys clinging to her hands. "So this is the new nanny," Caroline said coolly. "Already letting them run wild in the dirt, I see." Ethan bristled. "She's not just a nanny." Caroline's brows shot up. "Is that so?" She looked Brenda up and down, her gaze lingering on her belly. "My brother really knows how to pick them, doesn't he? Tell me, Adrian, what will people say when they learn the billionaire is playing house with his pregnant employee?" Brenda's face burned. She started to speak, but Adrian cut in sharply, his voice like ice. "Caroline, that's enough." But the damage was done. Brenda saw it, the flicker in Adrian's eyes, the doubt, the shame he hadn't meant to show. Her throat closed. She turned abruptly, leading the boys inside. That night, Brenda didn't come down for dinner. Adrian sat alone at the long table, his sons refusing to eat more than a few bites. James finally slammed his spoon down. "You made her sad." "Yeah," Ethan added, his small fists clenched. "You said she's just a nanny. But she's ours." The words stabbed Adrian's chest. His boys had chosen sides, and he wasn't on theirs. When he looked up, the chandelier's light felt too harsh, the room too empty. He realized then that Brenda wasn't just filling a role. She was filling the void left by Claire. She was giving his son something he hadn't been able to, hope. And he had almost driven her away. That night, Brenda sat by her window, staring out at the city lights. Her hand rested on her belly, her heart aching. She had promised herself she wouldn't let anyone's rejection define her again. But Adrian's words, "You're their nanny, that's all," echoed like a wound. A soft kick pressed against her palm. She whispered into the night, "Don't worry, little one. I won't let us be unwanted again." Tears streamed silently down her face. And across the hall, Adrian lay awake, haunted by the sound of his son's voices, by the look in Brenda's eyes when she turned away. For the first time, he realized he wasn't afraid of losing control. He was afraid of losing her. When Adrian snapped that Brenda was just a nanny, do you think it was fear talking, or pride? And if you were Brenda, would you forgive him? Share your thoughts in the comments. The house had never felt quieter. Brenda's absence from the breakfast table was a void the boys refused to fill. They sat with their arms crossed, refusing to look at Adrian. The clatter of cutlery echoed too loudly in the cavernous dining room, every sound magnified by the silence of resentment. Adrian set his fork down, appetite gone. His son's anger burned hotter than his own shame. He couldn't bear their accusing eyes. "Eat something," he murmured. James glared. Not hungry. Ethan pushed his plate away. We want Brenda. The words struck like arrows. Adrian opened his mouth, but no excuse, no defense came. Instead, he rose from the table, his chest heavy. He couldn't force them to understand what he barely understood himself. In her room upstairs, Brenda folded clothes into a suitcase. Not everything, just enough. She had made up her mind. She couldn't stay, not with Caroline's words replaying in her head, not with Adrian's cutting dismissal haunting her. But packing was harder than she thought. Every shirt folded felt like another goodbye she wasn't ready for. She paused when she came across a crayon drawing tucked in her drawer. Ethan and James had made it one afternoon. It was simple. Two boys holding hands with a woman, a round belly sketched in bright red marker, and a smiling sun overhead. Her eyes stung. She sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the drawing to her chest. How can I leave them? Her hand went to her belly. It's just us, baby girl, she whispered. We've done it before, and we'll do it again. But, her voice cracked. Why does it hurt so much this time? That evening, Adrian sat in his study, the decanter of whiskey untouched on the table. He had spent hours trying to bury himself in work, but the words kept echoing. You're their nanny, that's all. His fists clenched. He hadn't meant it. What he had meant was far more terrifying. You're becoming everything, and I don't know how to handle it. For the first time in years, he admitted the truth, to himself if not aloud. He was afraid of love. Afraid of betraying Claire's memory. Afraid of failing his sons again. But when he pictured Brenda leaving, her warm laugh, her steady presence, the way the boys curled against her as if she were the only safe harbor they knew, something inside him broke. He couldn't lose her. Not because of pride. Not because of fear. Down the hall, Ethan and James hatched a desperate plan. They had overheard Brenda on the phone with someone from an agency, arranging a ride. She's leaving, James whispered, panic in his voice. We can't let her, Ethan said fiercely. If Daddy won't stop her, we will. The boys crept into her room, finding her suitcase half-packed. Ethan grabbed the drawing from the nightstand and thrust it into her hands. You can't go, he pleaded, tears streaming. You're ours. Brenda knelt, hugging them tightly. Sweethearts, I love you more than you know. But sometimes adults. No, James shouted. First Mommy left. Now you. We'll have nobody. The words shredded her heart. She wanted to stay more than anything. But the memory of Adrian's dismissal still stung too deeply. Tears ran down her cheeks as she kissed them. I'm so sorry. At that same moment, Adrian rose from his study chair. His decision was made. He strode down the hall, each step heavier than the last. He paused outside Brenda's door, his heart pounding. He heard muffled voices, Ethan's sobs, Brenda's soothing whispers. And then he pushed the door open. The scene stopped him cold. His sons clung to Brenda like lifelines, their little bodies shaking with sobs. Brenda's eyes met his over their heads, shining with tears, but also with something harder. Resignation. Adrian, she whispered, her voice breaking. I can't do this anymore. The words stabbed deep, but he forced himself forward. No. Brenda, please. Don't go. She shook her head. You made it clear. I'm just their nanny. That's not what I meant. His voice cracked, raw with urgency. I was scared. I've been scared since the day Claire died. But you, he swallowed hard. You've given them back their laughter. You've given me back my life. I said the wrong thing because I was afraid of the right thing. Her lips trembled. And what's the right thing, Adrian? He dropped to his knees, his eyes level with hers. The right thing is that you're not just their nanny. You're family. You're the reason this house isn't a graveyard anymore. You're the reason I'm not still drowning." Tears streamed down Brenda's cheeks. "Don't say this if you don't mean it. I can't survive another man walking away. I'm not him." Adrian's voice was fierce now, steady. "I will never walk away from you. Or this child. Or my sons. Not again." For a long moment, silence reigned. Only Ethan and James's sniffles broke the air. Finally, Brenda whispered, "I don't know if I can believe that." "Then let me prove it," Adrian said softly. "Not with words. With staying. With choosing you every day." Brenda stared at him, torn between hope and fear. The pain of his earlier rejection still burned, but the truth in his eyes was undeniable. The boys tugged her hands, their voices pleading. "Please, Brenda. Please don't leave." Her hand went instinctively to her belly, feeling the kick of her unborn child. A life waiting. A chance for something new. Her gaze softened. "I want to believe you, Adrian. I do." "Then stay," he whispered. "Stay and let me show you." That night, Brenda didn't leave. Her suitcase remained by the bed, untouched. And Adrian, for the first time, prayed, not for money, not for power, but for courage. The courage to love again. If you were Brenda, would you take Adrian's promise at face value? Or make him prove it first? What would it take for you to trust again? Share in the comments. The days after Brenda chose to stay were tentative, like walking on ice that might crack at any second. The boys clung to her constantly, afraid she might vanish if they let go. Adrian hovered, awkward at first, then steadier as he worked to show, not just say, that he meant what he had promised. He made small changes. He joined the boys for breakfast, setting aside his phone. He left work early to be home in time for bedtime stories. And when Brenda's ankle swelled, he insisted she rest, quietly taking her chores onto his own shoulders. It wasn't perfect. The shadows of the past still lingered. But for the first time, the Carter mansion breathed with warmth instead of grief. One evening, as autumn painted the trees in shades of fire, Adrian found Brenda in the garden. She sat on a bench, the twins beside her, each boy with a marker in hand. "Hold still," James giggled, scribbling carefully across her round belly. Ethan held up his own work proudly. In bright, wobbly letters, "We're still here, sister." Brenda laughed, the sound rich and unguarded. "You two are going to give her a very colorful welcome." Adrian froze on the path, the sight hitting him like a tidal wave. His sons, once closed off, drowning in grief, were now giggling, scrawling hope onto Brenda's skin. And Brenda, radiant even with exhaustion, didn't look like a hired caretaker. She looked like home. Tears stung his eyes. He tried to blink them away, but one slipped free, hot and unbidden. He covered his mouth, his shoulders shaking silently. Brenda noticed. Her smile softened, her hand resting gently over the boy's artwork. For the first time, she didn't look like she might run. And Adrian let himself cry. Not for loss, but for the miracle of healing. The night Brenda went into labor was chaos. Her water broke in the middle of a thunderstorm, rain lashing against the mansion windows as the boys slept upstairs. She doubled over, gripping the back of a chair, her face pale but determined. Adrian rushed to her side, his voice frantic. "Brenda, God, what do I do?" She managed a strained laugh. "You call the driver. And you breathe." Within minutes, they were in the car, the city lights streaking past through sheets of rain. Brenda gritted her teeth, clutching Adrian's hand so tightly his knuckles turned white. "I'm right here," he whispered fiercely. "I'm not letting go." And he didn't. Not in the car. Not in the delivery room. Not through the hours of pain and sweat and fierce determination. When the cry finally filled the room, a wail sharp and perfect, Adrian felt the world stop. A nurse placed the baby in Brenda's arms. A tiny girl, wrapped in white, her skin soft as petals. Brenda's tears spilled freely as she whispered, "Hello, my love." Adrian leaned close, his eyes wet. "She's beautiful." Brenda looked up at him, exhausted but glowing. "Meet your daughter." The word, daughter, cracked something open inside him. Not just hers. His. Theirs. Adrian bent and pressed a trembling kiss to the baby's forehead. "Welcome home, little one." 2 days later, the mansion wasn't quiet anymore. Ethan and James raced down the hall to peek into Brenda's room, fighting over who got to hold the baby first. Their laughter rang out, sweet and unrestrained. Adrian stood in the doorway, watching. His heart felt full in a way he hadn't thought possible. Brenda sat propped up in bed, her hair loose around her shoulders, the baby nestled against her. She looked up at him, eyes tired but shining. "Come here," she murmured. He crossed the room, sinking onto the edge of the bed. She handed him the baby, and he cradled her carefully, his breath catching at her tiny fingers curling around his. "She's perfect," he whispered. Brenda rested her hand over his. "So are you, Adrian. Even if you don't see it." His throat tightened. "I don't deserve this. You. Them. Her." Brenda shook her head. "You deserve love, Adrian. So do they. So do I. We all do." For a long moment, they sat in silence, their hands entwined, the baby breathing softly between them. Finally, Adrian whispered the words he'd been afraid to say for weeks. "I love you, Brenda. Not because you saved my sons, not because you stayed, but because you're you. Strong, gentle, stubborn. Everything I didn't know I needed." Brenda's eyes glistened. "And I love you. Even when you're impossible." He laughed, the sound breaking through years of grief. Then he kissed her, softly, reverently, as Ethan and James barreled into the room shouting, "Dad's kissing Brenda." Brenda broke into laughter. Adrian groaned. But even as the twins giggled and the baby stirred, he knew this was exactly how life was meant to be. Messy, loud, and full of love. Weeks later, the house was transformed. The boys doted on their sister, inventing nicknames and reading her bedtime stories even though she couldn't understand. Brenda filled the halls with her humming. Adrian found himself laughing more than he worked. The grief hadn't vanished, it never would, but it no longer ruled them. It had been replaced by something stronger. Love. Adrian stood one evening in the doorway of the nursery. Brenda rocked the baby gently, humming the lullaby he now knew by heart. The boys dozed on the rug, exhausted from trying to help. Brenda looked up, her smile soft, and Adrian thought, "This is it. This is home. This is family. Not just rebuilt. Not just healed. But whole." Do you believe love can truly heal even the deepest grief, or does it simply help us carry it? Share your thoughts below. I'd love to read your stories. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out.